most common mistake I tend to see with brand owners like yourself is this assumption of who you're talking to. Across all of our clients, we consistently had this mismatch of who was buying the product and who the brand wanted to buy the product. There's been this influx of brands co-opting culture rather than cooperating with culture. People do not respond to that. A lot of us still feel the sort of post-iOS 14 blues. A great way to combat what has happened on Meta is with good content that just naturally resonates with people. You do need a lot of content to make paid socials work. There's no cap. Keep going until it works, and then when you find something that works, you need to do that 10x.
Ready to expand your marketing strategy into CTV ads? Roku, yes, the same Roku that powers nearly half of all TV streaming in the US, has just launched a game-changing self-service advertising platform custom-built for CTV performance. Introducing Roku Ads Manager. Roku Ads Manager was built with growth marketers in mind. Roku's CTV algorithms optimize your ads in real time, effectively reaching your target audience at scale. Meanwhile, interactive action ads, our integration with Shopify and other performance features, make it easy for you to run ads for your viewers to convert directly from their Roku remote or mobile phone. It's easy to set up your first campaign. Head over to advertising.roku.com/DTC and get started today for as little as $500. It's time to take your CTV ads to the next level with Roku Ads Manager.
I believe we've got a talk from one of our most popular internal podcast celebrities. I don't know if you guys have seen the All Killer No Filler episodes with Avery Valerio. Aves is a creative force of nature at Pilot House. She's the socials division content lead, so she's constantly working with content managers to create creative strategy across our entire portfolio. Today she's talking about how to maintain a brand when creating the metric fuck ton of content required to succeed on paid socials today through dialing in your personas and high marketing strategy. Does that mean you're high when you're doing it? I'm not sure exactly, but welcome to the stage, Avery Valerio.
This is exciting. I feel like it's really different being in person, because usually when we do this, Eric, it's like kind of esoteric, imagining you guys listening, but nice to be in the same room. When Eric asked me to speak a few months ago now, my initial plan was to get you guys all up and we would learn the apple dance, because we're in the height of brat summer. Yeah, Eric, a bit of this. And then I thought, that's getting a little bit old, so maybe I'll pivot and we'll look at a bunch of items and we'll decide, are these demure? Are these mindful? Where are we at on the scale there? And then I realized, what do people say? You could teach someone to fish, but you got to teach them how to make the pole. So I decided instead.
Is that the phrase? I've never heard that. I like that.
It's almost always wrong.
You can lead a horse to fish, but you can't make him use a pole.
Yeah, I'm going to try to lean on those. But I decided to go a different route and talk to you guys about my aunt. I thought it'd be really cool. She was my Auntie Lala, but Belle's, and she was a really cool person. Like, you just kind of light up a room. She had a really big laugh, and she came here from the Philippines in, I think, the 60s. Her big thing was Elvis had just come out, loved Elvis, almost always had a big glass of wine, and she was laughing really hard. She owned a business, and she's just everything that I think is really cool. And I think about her a lot. I think about her every day. And so I was doing some research recently, as I do, in my role here, into Coach and how they've rebranded. And probably if you asked me 2 months ago if I would purchase a Coach bag, I'd say, ew, that is so chuggy. It's so, sort of the early 2000s. I'm a stout, Tommy beaded bag girl. I like to know what the coolest bag is. It's very important to me. And so I was doing all this research, looking at these bags, and I don't have any social media. People are always really shocked by that. You really can't market to me like I'm a Fort Knox. Like, you're not getting your product in my hands. I think about marketing every day, so I know what you're doing. But I was doing this Coach case study, and the way that they were positioning the bag is that it's timeless. It's this big bag. Again, I was on the small handbag grind because that's cool. It's very cute. It's very demure. It's very mindful. So I was thinking, how have they done this? Because women in my age category cohort, we're looking at Coach again, and we haven't looked at Coach in a very long time. So I was doing this research, spending a lot of time with the brand, looking at these huge bags, and they really reminded me of my Auntie Lala, who would put everything in one of those bags, and she was ready for anything. She had snacks in there, white rabbits. I have white rabbits today. If anyone wants any, please approach me. So she always had something in the bag that I wanted, that I needed. And I was thinking, with my small bag, I have my phone in there. I use it for Apple Pay. I use it for everything, maybe an ID, and that's all I take around with me. So it was this really huge moment for me at 9 p.m. after spending a full Sunday with Coach, when I was looking at these huge bags specifically, and I decided to order one, which was very different for me because, like I was saying, you can't market to me. I like to do my own thing. And I also thought Coach was kind of disgusting. So it was really interesting this past sort of couple of weeks to think about my own customer behavior, because I'm constantly thinking about marketing as a marketer. And it was the first time in a really long time that I thought about myself as an actual customer and what happens there. And so something that we've been talking about a lot at Pilot House is, what are your customer personas? Who are the people who care about your brand? So I was thinking about myself as a Coach persona now. What was marketed to me was a timeless everyday bag that I'm going to carry, and one day, hopefully, one of my nieces will be on a stage and say, my Auntie Avery is so cool. She got a big bag, so I got a big bag. And it becomes this sort of legacy purchase. So I thought a lot about how did they, there's no one sitting at Coach who knows that I loved my Auntie Lala and that she had big bags. So how do you translate something like that that's so personal to ads that are going to resonate with a ton of people? And that's what we sort of do day in and day out at Pilot House, is we think, how can we create something that has very broad appeal, but also has, we've already talked about it up here on the stage today, that emotional component that's going to drive someone to make a purchase. So the most common mistake I tend to see with brand owners like yourself is this assumption of who you're talking to. I know my customer base. I've done the research. I've looked into the stats. We've been talking to, let's say we're looking at a brand, my fake mug brand. Let's go with the fake mug brand. Love the fake mug brand. They might assume my core customer is a busy mom. It's spill proof. You can throw it in a bag. That's who I'm marketing towards. But you might find by looking at reviews, actual data, that who you're selling that mug to is maybe a young man who's a professional, and he's just kind of lazy, and he makes his coffee quickly, and he's got to throw it in his bag because he has nowhere else to be. He's not organized. So I was finding across all of our clients, we consistently had this mismatch of who was buying the product and who the brand wanted to buy the product, which is oftentimes totally different. So then, as someone who is agency side, my job becomes, how do I tell my clients and instruct our team to tell their clients that they're typically wrong when it comes to their audience? Because that's a scary thing to hear. And it's also something that I think people, you kind of think is this huge issue, and it's like, okay, we got to throw out the whole business, nothing's working. But what I found is we can actually leverage the work that we do through paid social and ads and content creation specifically to better understand who those personas are. So something I say a lot, any of the Pilot House folks here have heard it, which is right message, right person, right product. So right message comes from the content creation side, which is, how am I kind of introducing myself? We're initially talking about using my time today to talk through hooks and what kind of hooks work well. So I was singing the Apple dance. But you have about 5 seconds to capture someone's attention. I think we've all heard the term attention economy tossed around 1,000 times. And so what that really means is nobody wants to pay attention to your brand. Nobody wants to be forced to click on an ad. So you have typically under 5 seconds, if it's a video, to actually make an impact with someone. Usually even shorter, around the 2.5 second mark. And so how can you actually communicate all of these feelings that you need to get someone off the funnel into 2.5 seconds? It's not easy, and there are a lot of kind of ways to go about it. So what's so important when we're talking about personas is this idea of consistent messaging. Wimbledon is a great example. The Wimbledon TikTok account launched thousands of TikToks over the course of a week. It's madness. Like when I said to you, the metric fuck ton of content that you have to create is funny, but it's also not funny. It's very overwhelming. It's daunting. You need to kind of account for everything almost. And I think we've already heard this today. You just kind of make the same stuff over and over again, which can feel like there's a lack of identity in that because there's no actual messaging. Who is the persona? So where we kind of start is we go further back. I love these. I come from a background of political strategy and communications, which is embarrassing around this time every 4 years.
Especially now.
Yeah.
This time of year. Yeah.
Terrible. Don't ask me about it. Covered in NDAs. Unfortunately, one thing that I did learn, which is very handy, is a message box. So I don't know if you guys have ever created a message box, but I know you have a pen and paper, so I would encourage you to put one down on paper now and start thinking about it. So you're going to want to separate your piece of paper into 4 quadrants. And so you think about your brand from sort of your core persona. And you start with this idea of us on us. So how do we as a brand articulate who we are? What is the language that we like to use? What are the words that we find most effective and the words that sort of resonate with people and sparkle? And then you go for us on them. What do we say about that core persona? How do we describe them if you're talking to someone within the marketing sphere or outside of it? How would you describe that persona as not only a member of your audience, but as a person? What do they care about? Where are they spending their time on the internet is very important. Is this a Reddit cohort? Is this a Pinterest cohort? Where are they spending their time? And how do they sort of feel about, which sounds very general, but life? Like really dig into them as a human being. And the next is them on us. So what do they say about us as a brand? What do they say about the product? How does that sort of core persona interact with how we portray ourselves? And then finally, them on them. So how do they think about themselves? And this is where I actually find the most value most of the time, is how does the person that I want to purchase whatever it is the client is, how do they actually relate to themselves? Because when you think about marketing, it is, when you boil it down, it's just playing with psychology, and it's playing with the psychology of desire. So what does that person want that's sort of missing in their life? And you can come about it different ways. If I'd seen a coach ad that was like, oh, your stuff is going to be on the ground, it's going to be a disaster, that would not have worked because that would have engaged a different type of desire that's fear-based. But I thought about it more in a positive way. I had this desire to carry on a tradition of being a Filipino woman with a huge bag. That's what drove the purchase. So thinking about desire and how that plays into their life, really important. And then what I do with this message box is very, like I said, no social media. I love a pen and paper. I will put this above my workspace for whatever client I'm thinking about, and every single thing has to come back to this message box. Because like I was saying, if you're pumping out thousands of pieces of content and it doesn't have an anchor in a person, it's useless. There's no reason. People can sense that very quickly now because we have all been doing that for the past few years. I'm guilty.
Would you say that founders are some you find often that they're missing the markets because they have maybe too general a sense of who their customer is rather than this like really focused lens that helps move them?
Yeah, totally. I think having a very focused lens and imagining a person on the other side of the ads has been like a critical point in the way that I create content. Like previously, I still think like this, but it's like, how can I decrease the costs associated with this video? What are the iterations I can make and the hooks I can add? How can I increase clicks? Where am I getting traffic from? But thinking about an actual human being doing those behaviors who's associated with this quadrant that you've sort of spelled out for yourself, and every single piece of content comes back to that. So whether it's like a dad giving Eric, whether it's a dad who wants to feel like they're fitting in, or a high school basketball player who wants to feel like, okay, yeah, I've got the newest kind of insole, I feel confident in my game day prep. Really like anchoring is, I think, the most important takeaway, and not hopping on things like Brat Summer just because it's relevant, having the freedom and also I think the confidence in your brand to say that's not going to resonate. I don't have to do that, because I think there's been this like influx of brands, I say this a lot, but co-opting culture rather than cooperating with culture. And we're moving into an era of marketing where people do not respond to that. 3 years ago, or maybe more, we all loved when a brand participated in a trend. We thought it was so cool, and oh my God, someone on that marketing team is on TikTok. That's so insane. And now it ruins the fun. I think we all feel that pretty quickly with any trend. You see someone like Tim Hortons make an ad that says very demure, and it was a honey cruller, which is the worst possible.
Is that a demure donut?
No, it's not. If you said no, you passed the test. But yeah, it becomes this sort of machine where we're just constantly co-opting these very human elements of psychology without cooperating and finding the place that the brand actually sits in.
Can you give us any examples, like from clients where you really have managed to kind of focus a message that was maybe had a greater efficiency than the other ones through this method?
Yeah, for sure. So one of our clients, Big Blanket, they sell big blankets. Shocking.
They're huge.
They are 100 square feet of blanket, massive. So you would think that alone is this sort of strategic advantage. But what happened was eventually, post sort of COVID and everyone having to stay inside, we started expanding the product line because not everyone is sitting inside all of the time now. So a 100 square foot blanket doesn't have the same pizzazz as it did in maybe the height of 2020. So how do we both increase our returning customers and acquire net new customers? And so what we've done with Big Blanket is we discovered that there are actually 3 very specific personas that live inside that brand. The first one would be a millennial mom. I usually call her Melissa, just to give her, again, that like personality. And so they have specific products, these sort of Melissas, that they gravitate to in this larger catalog now. And then we've also got, I call them the homebodies. And so these are people who, I guess a good thing to mention too with their sort of millennial mom cohort is they are very focused on the way that their home looks more than any of our other cohorts and personas. So what we found was we could advertise the higher priced items that just look better because that's what they're looking for. And so we went out and we found content creators who matched Melissa and what she would see on her feed. And those are by far sort of the top ads for that cohort of people because that's how they're used to digesting content and that's how they're used to making purchases, is based in sort of a community, someone they trust, someone that looks like them. The next one, we call them the homebodies. These are people who have inside sort of hobbies that they love. So they're gamers, they like to read, they just want to be inside. I kind of fit into that category. I don't want to talk to anyone. We sell these oversized hoodies, and they're the perfect product match for that customer because they want to feel secure. And then what we discovered is we could put limited edition prints on these hoodies that are, again, grounded in that initial message box work. So we could discover things like what are the actual indoor hobbies that people relate to their personality. So that is things like video games.
Settlers.
Yeah. Yeah, all of those different kind of inside hobbies that you just think, this is who I am, and I want to buy something with this on it because I'm not going out. It's not what I'm spending my money on. And then the third category we found, and these are all like vastly different. This is the same product, same company, very different personas. The third one, we call them the indulgent man. So this is sort of a middle America dad who likes to have the best of the best in whatever he's purchasing. So we have a line of bedding that's highly technical, and it's just better than different bedding. There's a thread count to sort of account for. The sheets have really cool inside labels. So this persona wants to feel like, oh, you have an old set of bedding. You don't have the bedding that's 25% bigger than a king-size bed. Or they even want to gravitate towards the like large indoor blankets, again, because it's a better product than what's on average. So the way that we market to them is we show those sort of USPs. We're very benefit-focused with them. There's not a lot of fun products being shown to them. It's a lot of grayscale down, all within the same ad account too, is where we run all of these ads from. But it's grayscale down, looks kind of boring next to the other ones, but it works for that audience. And I think that comes back to the right message will find the right people. Probably a lot of us still feel the sort of post iOS 14 blues. And a great way to combat what has happened on Meta is with good content that just naturally resonates with people. Like if
That does the targeting.
Exactly.
Target
They're engaging with
themselves.
it. And we'll almost bait engagement as well. So when I find an ad that works for one of those 3 cohorts of people, we will find ways to get people to comment on that ad and engage with that ad. And the brand does a really great job of replying in the comments, which moderation is so important. But we continue to sort of press it into their algorithms and I don't want to say force, but sort of force it into those right circles of the people that it's most relevant for.
One of the things you talk about on the podcast all the time is not being afraid to be weird with it, kind of thing. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like a good example is like what I used to do for a living was I used to do a lot of like PR work. So it was taking a politician and making them likable, which is really not easy to do, and I wouldn't recommend it. But what I would often do is I would take these people, I would put them in a room, and I would find a song that really hyped them up, and I would force them to move their body, because moving your body around kind of shook up their perception of themselves, so that them on them, and allowed them kind of this open freedom to be weird and be authentic when they got on the stage. And so as someone who's agency side, I do a lot of shaking and forcing clients to move, which is sort of forcing yourself into an uncomfortable state and thinking if there's kind of no judgment, no concern, obviously nothing offensive, no PR issues, but why not do the funny thing? Why not do the thing that you know is going to resonate? Why not shoot that shot? What are the actual downsides of it? So it comes to a lot of kind of, like I said, sort of shaking their fears loose in clients, and remembering that, like I said, it takes the right content to reach the right audience now. So you're doing your brand a disservice by not getting weird. And I think I see a lot of this with clients or even our internal content strategists. They'll be like, oh, it's different. It's not a typical ad where you're holding the coffee cup and you're saying, this is my new coffee cup from Avery's Made Up Coffee Cup Company. I love it because X, Y, and Z. And that's such a safe piece of content, but we've all seen that piece of content 1,000 times. So getting weird doesn't mean like, I don't know, doing something that's so off-brand, but it just means being free to go that layer deeper into the authenticity and think about that message box and what is this person actually looking for.
And like when you are drilled down and have such a good focus on who your customer is, it probably gives you intelligent ways to be weird, not just wacky, not just be generally wacky, but be sort of like weird in a way that'll resonate with that specific person.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one thing I would encourage you all to do as well is I don't have any social media, but I have burner accounts set up for different sort of verticals that I'm in. Like I was saying, figure out where they live. So is it Reddit? Is it Twitter? Is it Pinterest? Is it they're just scrolling on Meta? Where do they live? And then what kind of content are they looking at? Because then you can figure out what are the boundaries of weird and what is entertaining, but also going to drive the conversion. Really important to just be in their community to understand what weird could mean. Because obviously weird for Dad Gang is going to be much different than a different product. You guys, I know my dad has some wicked lame jokes, lame-o hobbies that he would love to see represented in an ad and would gravitate towards. Like if you...
Sorry, it's only for cool dads, not lame dads.
I'll tell Scott, but if you showed him an ad of he plays a ton of pool and what he loves about pool is math. And I feel like math is like a common dad.
Not for me, but.
Common maybe not in this room. So it's like if you are leaning into those things and making content where it's just like, here's me in my hat solving for X, I don't really know. It would be a fantastic piece of content that would resonate with also a broader piece of dads, not just my one lame dad.
I was looking back at our podcasts that we've done this year, and I think our most popular one that we did with you, and one of our most popular podcasts was one where you kind of came to us talking about micro ads or ads that were like really, we focus on that 2.5 seconds, 3 second hook. But you, I think on that podcast, were talking about ads that were just that long even.
Yeah.
Super short. Is that something that we're still building into the mix?
Yeah. So unfortunately on a platform like TikTok, you have to be 10 seconds, but I love a 5-second ad on Meta. And a great example can tie it back to some of the persona work on Big Blanket. That homebody cohort I identified as being predominantly millennial men. So like the younger side of millennials, but millennial men. So what we did was we took a audio from SpongeBob and we paired it with a blanket that I knew millennial men liked. and it was, I think, 7 seconds long. And last year it was one of our top performing and top spending ads. And it was like, it feels when you look at it really like, oh, this girl just made this on TikTok in 5 minutes and it just happened to work. But it was like all this time and all this research of figuring out who are these people who are ready to buy this product that's got this pattern on it, and then what do they enjoy, what makes them feel comfortable, because that's another thing with that homebody cohort is we want to make them feel comfortable, we want to make them feel nostalgic even. Works really well with the video games, stuff like that. So throwing on that SpongeBob audio feels like nothing, but it was the true sort of difference maker in that ad. And you can see when we dive into things sort of on platform, that is who's interacting with it. And they're commenting and they're saying like, this is so funny, I remember this episode, or finding things like that. Again, it ties back to just being relevant for that person. But there's obviously a huge amount of people that it applies to. So it's not too niche, but it's still like this little wink to that person that tells you they know. If you know, you know.
Yeah, if you know, you know. Any questions out there for creative Maven Avery? She'll be here all week as well for further talks. Anything else you'd want to highlight on your creative journey?
No, I think it's just the put that message box, even if it's not the physical one, keep that message box up there, because that is truly how you create successful content and create the volume of content you need while making it sort of work for your brand and not just putting all this spew out into the world and hoping something lands.
And was it a square for each avatar, or was it? And so in the 4 squares, you're going 4 avatars, or what?
Yeah. So I would do a message box for each avatar, and some of you might have one very specific, but each sort of customer persona and avatar, map it out and get that specific with it. Like Eric said, I'll be around, and there's nothing that brings me more joy than doing this type of thing. So yeah, definitely hit me up. But yeah, keep it in your head or keep it above your workspace. Keep it as the through line, because you do need a lot of content to make paid socials work. Like that is not something we can get around with smart content or
how can you quantify that? What is a metric shit ton of content?
I like to tell people it isn't even a sliding scale. So it's not even like if you're spending more, you need more. You obviously do need more for paid socials, but if we're talking about organic, you just need to do it until you cannot do it anymore. Essentially, at this point, if you have 15 minutes and an iPhone, you should be doing it. It's so important, and it can absolutely change your business.
Yep.
So it's sort of like there is no limit. Like I was saying, Wimbledon did thousands of TikTok, and they're an established brand. I think we've all heard of Wimbledon, but they did thousands over a single week. So there's no like cap. You just have to keep going until it works, and then when you find something that works, you need to do that 10x.
I meant to ask Drew, actually, with all the roles that you have in as VP of Marketing, how much of your time, like how many videos a week are you making, and how much of that time does it take you?
We're probably putting out, on the organic side, 1 to 2 a day.
Yeah. And you're just recording them and then sending them to an editing team, kind of?
Some of it is like recorded professionally at a high school or with an athlete.
Yeah.
And some of it's right in-house. We built a basketball court in our office.
Nice.
So like we'll make content right there, kind of like with an iPhone, but it just makes it so much easier. And then on the paid side, we're probably putting out close to like 200 a month, maybe around there. But a lot of that's iterations, right? Maybe 20 to 30 concepts, 40 concepts, and then iterations on all of those.
Top.
Yeah.
What's your favorite iteration? What's your, like in terms of the hacky things, or are there any sort of hacky tips you have, or when it comes to maybe not the concepts but the iterations with overlays or stills or anything?
Yeah, I think something that I've seen a lot of brands doing lately is not watching accessibility on platform, which is very hacky and very simple. But I keep seeing brands come to us and they have text on their ads that is like so microscopic, and again it comes back to thinking about like the human experience of absorbing an ad. So if I'm scrolling on Meta very quickly and you have a headline and like a paragraph and a half of a subheadline and then a lead-in, it's too much and it's impossible to read on the device that people are usually using, which is mobile. So just thinking like very critically about how does this actually look on a feed to a human being who doesn't look at this brand 24/7, and really structuring your ads around like, I look at things from like a USP. So what is the actual USP? The cup keeps my coffee warm. What is the benefit that adds to my life? I have warm coffee for longer. I really enjoy that. What is the one-liner that's associated with that in ads, which would just on the fly be keep your coffee warmer longer?
Yeah.
And so thinking about things in that like succinct way and constantly cutting down, I think is like.
And then how does that make that person feel in a way, right? How is their life different now that they have this Stanley Cup?
Yeah. How terrible is it to have cold coffee?
How do they feel with it?
Yeah. Thinking about the kind of upside of the benefit and then tying that into a one-liner and just being succinct and concise, because people don't want to look at your ads. I think it's an important thing to take away. So how do you make them want to look? And even if you don't succeed in making them want to look, how do you make them feel enough curiosity to annoyingly roll their eyes and take a second look?
Yeah. And then just put white text put something white under the part where it says sponsored ad on TikTok so people don't see it.
Yeah, that was. Remember? I did think we talked about that.
Every time I look down on sponsored ad, I'm just like, I've seen some brands put something white there so it makes it harder to see the sponsored. I think that's my.
People really got hip to that.
Did they? Okay.
You don't see a lot of that anymore. It's so hard to hard to hide the ads now.
You just have to entertain. You have to grab them. You have to entertain them. You can't just trick them.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you have to be entertainers. You can't just trick people anymore.
Nice. Any comments out there or questions for Avery? Oh, yeah, we've got over here. Alia, is that? Ayla. Nice to meet you.
We've talked a lot this morning about making an emotional connection, organic content. I'm curious your thoughts on AI and how will it change this? Will it change this?
Yeah, that's a great question for me. I would consider myself a bit of an AI hater. Love it for optimizing my workflow, and I love it for the way that it saved me time. But when it comes to actual content creation, people know and they don't like it. If you put together a piece of static content that's made by AI instead of a real person, almost always people know. And so I really caution clients from going that route because it's feels easier, because most of the time I haven't seen it actually produce results. And in very niche cases, it can. You can do a really fun AI background, and we've seen that at Pilot House, and it works because the audience responds well to it. But overwhelmingly, I find on platform, people just are not interested. And so, yeah, as you guys can guess with my pen and paper, anti-social media, I don't use it a lot for the creative part. I think you do have to do that work of thinking about humans and thinking about psychology and what does it mean to be a marketer. And like I said, there's places for it in workflow, but I think in actual content creation, it can be difficult. I like to use it too for like, what are some ideas for iterations from this human-made piece of concept? So I always kind of ground it in something that a human being did think about very thoughtfully and did create, and then sort of use it from there. But I think for actual concepting, it still definitely has a long way to go and a lot of weak spots. So I tend to stray away from it because I think people are just inundated. And like you said, we're talking about what moves the needle truly is human connection. It wasn't an algorithm that had me purchase a Coach bag. It was the love that I have for my aunt. So you have to think about the actual purchasing power behind emotion and how that's often removed when we're using AI.
I find it's good for like a blank page, like if you feed it a bunch of data and start me off with my first 5 avatars or whatever. But I do find it is pretty generic. It definitely, when you're putting copy directly from AI directly into a platform, it's maybe not going to perform as well. But when it comes to putting all the options on the table and kind of putting everything out there in front of you, I find there's some value in that.
Totally. Yeah, I always find it really interesting. There's a kind of mixologist who takes ChatGPT and himself, and he has someone tell him exactly what they want to drink and what they like flavor-wise. And every single time, the person can tell which drink was made by the human being, just taking in the information, and which drink was made by AI, taking the information and then spitting out the perfect cocktail recipe for them. So there are these beautiful ways that I think humans put their stank on things that it's really hard to replicate.
I like that. Stank.
Stank.
Bart,
Yeah, I just had a question about I mainly just want to get your thoughts on, you're talking about entertaining in ads, but how trends don't necessarily work, because I feel like a lot of the time the trend can outweigh whatever you're selling. So if somebody's saying, very demure or trying to play into the culture, that saying or that entertainment may make people forget that there's a product to be sold. But then you have brands like True Classic, who kind of dominated comedy and using actors in their ads while still tying in the product and making sure you might have watched a minute-long ad with a skit, but then you're getting the t-shirt at the end of the day. So what do you think is that fine balance between the entertainment sometimes outweighing the actual product that's being sold? And how do you kind of find a balance when you're creating ads?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think even a good example using your own brand is like, if I made you today learn the Apple dance and we filmed you doing that, it's not featuring the product. You're not doing it because there's a way to feature the product. If you happen to have created a lime green hat with black text, then it's like, oh, this is serendipitous. It makes sense for me to be in this space, right? It makes sense for this product to be linked to this trend in this way. But if there's no clear through line like that, then I think that's when you get lost in is this just a guy in a hat doing this dance on my feed? I don't understand. So if there's no strong connection between your brand and what you sell and who you are and the trend itself, I always tell brands just stay away from it, because it's work time that you could be doing something valuable with. And there are these like lightning in a bottle moments where sometimes maybe you did have a lime green hat that happened to have.
We do have one, yeah.
Perfect. Brat dad.
Brat dad.
I'll get that one for my dad.
I don't know if that's good.
Brat girls over dad edition. But yeah, that it's relevant.
Bart
and it
just
feels
switched
good.
up.
Yeah, it is. Bart Summer. But yeah, like it comes down to like, does this actually make sense for someone to engage with? And I think what True Classic does very well is they are longer form and they are very funny pieces of content, but the funny is typically wrapped around like, I got sweat stains or I'm covering my dad bod. Like, it is so ingrained in the actual product offering. Like, my Made of Coffee cup brand could be like, you're spilling coffee on yourself, things like that that are just goofy and silly and funny. But it makes sense for us to be talking about that and for us to be showcasing that. And I think as long as you can find a way to highlight the actual product through the storytelling and comedy, then you're safe. But if it feels like a stretch, it is a stretch, and it's a waste of time.
I feel like those car dealerships are an interesting example that do they jump on trends and do silly things just to get them to know about the brand, right? And they're highly localized. It's only gonna have so much impact, but I always find it interesting to see them do that.
Yeah, sometimes it's definitely just like you're building a like fun thing for someone at the office to do. Like I really, maybe once or twice do those, I know the ones you're talking about, like car dealership ones actually result in someone going in and buying a car. Most likely because it's a small town, typically they would have bought their car there anyway. So it's interesting, this idea of like, they're not really forced like us, people who are actually selling things online. They don't have to cooperate and sort of tread carefully with culture because they just are making culture. Because they're not really trying to sell you a car online.
Just awareness.
So I think that's also like a fine line where you can have a lot more fun culturally and kind of create culture, interact with it when you're not selling something. But when you're selling something, it just becomes kind of...
You gotta sell.
Yeah, it's a bit cheap. It's like, what are you selling? Why is that guy doing the brat dance?
Yeah.
Goes back to that.
Very cool. Any other bratty questions out there? Oh, let's go, Pamela.
I have a question. I don't want to be one of those brands that thinks I know my core persona, and then it turns out, right, that's not who's actually buying. So if I'm looking to build my grid, does it make sense to start with the them on us quadrant and build out from there, like really look at what people are saying and who is buying, or what would be the best strategy for that?
Yeah, I always start with us on us because I think it's always important to understand who you are, I guess, and who you want to be to those people. So it's not necessarily saying who is the brand, I already know the answer to the other side. It's just really mapping out how do I want to be related to, what do I want people to feel when they buy one of my products, what are our actual sort of strategic advantages, and how does that solve and create emotional reactions in people. So start with just really understanding who your business is, and then moving on to your sort of assumed core persona. And then what I typically find is this just changes. You start to test and you start to see the data come in, and you'll see typically it's new personas that you just haven't thought about, or you'll see that you're completely wrong. And something I mentioned before is like you can really leverage paid social work to do this. I think previously people were like, oh, I have to go find a creative agency and I have to pay them a heap of money and I have to have them tell me who I'm marketing to. With paid social, I think we all know you can run these things as tests and you can find out the actual answer to these questions instead of these assumptions. So it's a very long-winded answer, but I'd start with yourself and then go to who your assumed personas are. And then from there, start looking at the actual data and let that inform your next steps. Because we are very privileged, like I've never seen Mad Men, but I assume it was a lot of vibes back in the day. It was a lot of putting an ad out there, and then it's like, what are the vibes? I think it was good. I think it was bad. But now we get to see comments as well. And we get to see reviews. We get to see, whether it's a comment on an ad or a comment on an organic post, you get actual customer feedback delivered to the palm of your hand, basically, which is so invaluable and something I see a lot of people overlook.
And you're kind of describing the pilot test, I guess, right? A little bit, which is sort of it's the testing mechanism that Pilot House uses to sort of get signals on which of these angles and avatars are resonating. Yeah.
To get like granular too, like what I like to do is it depends. Like Big Blanket's sort of a weird example now because they're so fractional. But if you think there's kind of very similar personas, it's like what is sort of standardized in your tests, and then what is getting the most click-through rate? Is it saying this keeps my coffee warmer longer? Is it saying no more cold coffee? Like, what are the actual ways that they're interacting with it? And I love looking at click-through rate as like kind of a first line of defense.
Canary in the coal mine.
Exactly, yeah. There you go. I'm so bad with the sayings.
Yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm a dad.
I would have said like parrot in the coal harbor or something. But yeah, canary in the coal mine, where it's like that is a great metric to use to say, are people interested in this? Are they reacting to it as I want them? Do I have the right message going to the right person?
Okay, well, let's leave it there today. Thank you so much. Come talk to Avery about a creative strategy. Cheers.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're not getting the D2C newsletter, you can subscribe for free at directtoconsumer.co. And if you want to learn more about Pilot House's all-killer, no-filler services, take off to pilothouse.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.